love cruising now. That was not always the case. We were Disney people before then. We knew all the tips and tricks. We could get you a deeply discounted Disney trip. That's what we like to do. And then they took all those things away, and we needed a vacation, badly needed a vacation. And so we're like, what can we do? What's going to be a cheap vacation that we can get away for a few days? This was the end of our church planning season, and things were really hard. And we came across a cruise and never wanted to do this before because I don't want to be on a boat with thousands of people away from land, getting seasick, being bored out of my mind. I don't want any of that. But we didn't really have another option that we could afford. So we went with that. And we got on that ship for the first time, and I was still pretty leery when we got on the ship. And it wasn't until really the first night that I got it. And since I got it, that's all I want to do. That's what I want to do with my time. That's the vacation I want to take. And we took a trip of a lifetime vacation last year, and we turned it into a cruise because that's what we like doing now. And if you took me in 2019 before we took our first cruise and you said, who is this person? What kind of thing do they want? You would never believe that I would enjoy it the way that I enjoy it now. But there's something that happened. There's an experience that I had that changed everything for me. And sometimes that's the way it has to be. You get something, you don't get something, you like something, you don't like something, and you have one experience and it changes everything. And we're looking in the book of James starting today. We're not actually going to be in James. We're just getting ready for James. We've been going through the life of Elijah and talking about that for a while, but now we're moving on to James. And James is an interesting character because James has an experience that takes him from being one way to completely another way. But you got to understand what it's like to have an experience like that to change you before you can understand really what he's talking about fully. So what we're going to do today is I want to look at the life of James. And we're going to look at all the information that we have, which is not a ton of information that we have about his life, and how he went from somebody being so anti-Jesus' ministry to the leader of Jesus' ministry. So we're going to talk about James. Now, when I talk about James, it can be kind of confusing because there are 3 Jameses mentioned in the New Testament, and I spent a lot of time this morning trying to figure out if it's Jameses or if it's James, and you just assume there's multiple. I'll have to ask somebody else about that. But apparently, I'm going with Jameses. There are 3 Jameses in the New Testament. There's James, the brother of John, and he is the one that comes up the most often. He's the one that's closest to Jesus. You got James, the brother of John. Then in the apostle, he's an apostle. You got the other apostles. You got little James, James the less, and he doesn't show up quite as much, but he's still there, so you get him. And then you get James, who is the brother of Jesus, and that's who we're talking about today. The guy that we're talking about, the guy that wrote the book of James, which is the first, as far as we can tell, it's the first book of the New Testament that was written, was not an apostle. He was just a guy who happened to be close to Jesus because of his family relationship, and that's who we're talking about today. Now, the first time that we see James, he's not even really in the story. He just gets mentioned. And that's in Matthew chapter 13, verses 55 and 56. It says, is not this talking about Jesus? Jesus is in his hometown. He's preaching in his hometown. He's doing his first ministry there. And they do not know what to do with Jesus. In fact, they ultimately reject Jesus. They don't know what to do with him. And this is one of the reasons that they struggle to accept him. They say, is this not the carpenter's son? And is not his mother called Mary? And are not his brothers James and Joseph and Simon and Judas? And are not all his sisters with us? Where then did this man get all these things? The first time we see him is just in his hometown. He's listed as one of the siblings of Jesus. And we don't know the order. We could assume that James is the second brother, that Jesus is the oldest brother, and James is right after him. We can assume that, but we don't really know a whole lot of details. But what we know is the people in that community identified Jesus as a brother of James. And then James shows up later on. But they said, I don't know what to do with this guy. He's saying things that sound good. He's doing things that sound good, but can we really believe that this guy is the Messiah, that he's a good teacher when we watched him grow up in youth group? Can we really believe that he has something to offer whenever we know his mom and dad? Should this not be somebody different before we're going to accept it? We knew him growing up, and we know Jesus wasn't getting in trouble growing up. We know he wasn't like a bad kid growing up. But still, you look at a kid, you look at a teenager, and you don't expect a whole lot. At least that's what adults do. They don't expect a whole lot. You got to have a mindset shift to expect a ton out of kids and teenagers. But they're like, we haven't had that mindset shift. We don't know what to do with this guy. And James comes up first there, just listed as a brother of Jesus. James actually shows up for the first time in Mark chapter 3, and he does not show up as somebody who's pro-Jesus' ministry. Maybe he's pro-Jesus as his brother, but he's not pro-Jesus' ministry. Jesus has been preaching, and he's starting to get a large crowd of people follow him, and those people follow him back to his house. And in Mark chapter 3, verse 20, it says this, "Then he went home, and the crowd gathered again so that they could not even eat. And when his family heard of it, they went out to seize him, for they were saying, 'He is out of his mind.'" This is the first reference that we have to James actually having an opinion about something or saying something. And his opinion is, Jesus is crazy. What is he doing? What is he doing? He's got these crowds of people. He's got so many people in his house, he can't even stop to have a meal because people are there all the time. People are crowding in on him all the time. Why is he letting these people in his house? And Jesus is teaching these things. People are starting to say he's the Messiah, but they're like, no, there's no way he's the Messiah. He must have just lost his mind. In the next verse, the Pharisees actually talk about this too. And they say that Jesus has a demon. They both go that he's lost his mind, but the brothers are a little bit nicer about it. They don't say he's had a demon. They just say he's lost his mind. And this is the first opinion that we have of James, is that Jesus is crazy. He can't believe this. What is he saying? What is he teaching? He can't do these things. We've got to restrain him physically and take him back to mom's house so we can get him under control, because clearly he is unwell. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to. He can't do miracles. He can't do miracles. We grew up with this guy. He never did any miracles growing up. So why is he doing miracles now? What is he doing? He's just a nice guy. Jesus is a nice guy. He just can't run these people off. We got to step in and we've got to help him. That's James's first reaction to Jesus' ministry. The next reaction we get to Jesus' ministry is not quite as forgiving. In John chapter 7, these brothers approach Jesus, and it's coming up on Passover time. Everybody's going to Jerusalem for Passover. Everybody's getting ready for that Passover. And they say, if you're this big ministry leader, if you're the Messiah, if you're the one that is to come, then show yourself. Get out there and show yourself. Jesus is not ready for this yet, but they say this to him. His brothers said to him, "Leave here and go to Judea, that your disciples may see the works you're doing. For no one works in secret if he seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world." For not even his brothers believed him. His brothers, including James, come to him and say, "Fine, Mr. Big Shot, Mr. Egomaniac, that thinks you're something, that thinks you're the Messiah, that thinks you're the one that was sent to bless all the rest of us. If you're that, then what are you doing back here? Get out there and prove it. Go to Jerusalem. Overthrow the government like you're supposed to do. Run out the Romans like you're supposed to do." Like, even if Jesus has never been a bad kid, even if you've never seen him sin before, he's still your big brother. He's not your little brother. That changes some things theologically. He's still your big brother. He's still the kid that you grew up with. And they say, if you're this guy, if you're this big man, then why aren't you showing off? Why aren't you going to Jerusalem? Why aren't you stepping up and doing more? Can you imagine what it was like for these brothers of Jesus to accept that Jesus was the Messiah? Can you imagine how difficult that would be? Let's say your brother showed up and said, "I'm the one sent from God." What would you do? Just hit him? Or what do you do? Your brother shows up and says, "I'm the one sent from God. I'm the one that's here to rescue people." Crowds of people start coming to you and talking about how great your brother is, how your brother's doing miracles, how your brother's making all of these things happen. How do you respond to that? One, you can just be jealous, right? Because how is he any better than me? You've been competing against him your entire life. How is he any better than me? Or maybe you look at Jesus and you know that he's humble. You know that he's not an egomaniac. He's not somebody putting himself out there. And you don't really understand how this could happen, because what they thought the Messiah was going to do is overthrow the government. They thought the Messiah was going to run out the Romans and establish a new kingdom. And Jesus isn't going to do that. This is the guy that forgives everybody. This is the guy that lets things go. How is he going to be a revolutionary leader? They can't accept it. The next time we get a view of James, James isn't there. And that's what's notable, is not that James is there, but that James is not there. On the cross, Jesus didn't say very much. He said a few things, but he basically just spent his time trying to breathe. When he was on the cross, what was notable is that the brothers are not there. In John chapter 19, starting in verse 26, it says, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing nearby, he said to his mother, woman, behold your son. Then he said to the disciple, behold your mother. And from that hour, the disciple took her to his own home. This is a confusing passage because Jesus looks at John, his best friend, the one that he loved. He looks at John and says, I want you to take care of my mom from now on, which is weird because she has other kids. We've got 4 other sons listed and a various number of daughters, at least 2 daughters. She's got kids. Why is it that somebody would need to take care of her? My best guess, and this is a guess, so don't write commentaries about it. This is a guess. My best guess is that Mary sided with Jesus. When Jesus is doing these miracles, she knows about Jesus. She saw the angel. She knows the prophecies. She knows who he is, but the brothers and sisters don't. And at this point, all the brothers and sisters have walked away, and she's not on speaking terms with her other kids, just with Jesus. And this woman is about to be left completely alone while her oldest son is killed. And she doesn't have anybody else. So I don't think this is a permanent thing that he's supposed to take care of her for the rest of the life. I think this is a temporary thing because she's alone, because the brothers don't believe. The sisters don't believe. Those closest to Jesus, other than her, cannot accept the things that he's been saying and the things that he's been doing. And so he passes Mary off to someone else to take care of her until the siblings come around. Now, after that, James gets mentioned a few other times, but it's weird how James gets mentioned. When Paul converts to Christianity, who's Saul, also named Saul, converts to Christianity, one of the people that he goes to meet with is Peter, right? That makes sense. You go meet with Peter, the lead apostle, you go spend some time with him. But another guy that he meets with is James, the brother of Jesus. The guy who didn't believe, the guy who thought Jesus was crazy, the guy who didn't go to the cross and wasn't on speaking terms with Jesus' mother, with his own mother, when he had, for some reason, Paul, goes to meet with James. When Peter sends a message back to the church at Jerusalem, he says, I want you to take this message back and I want you to tell all the apostles, that makes sense, and James. Why is James included? This guy who is an unbeliever, why would he be included? The last time we see him, he has nothing to do with Jesus, but he's included. There's a really important moment that happens with the church. In Acts chapter 15, there's an argument, really the first big argument in the midst of the church that comes up. And what's happening is there are people that saying that all the new believers need to convert to Judaism as a part of being saved. Now, we know that salvation comes when you recognize that you're a sinner, believe that Jesus is the only Son of God, and cry out to him for forgiveness and rescue. We know that. But they're still struggling with figuring that out. They're thinking there must be other things included on top of this. So they say, hey, we want these people to accept Jesus. We want them to come to faith. We want them to believe. Absolutely, we want them to do that. But there's also a bunch of other rules that they have to follow. And they have this argument. They have this argument about what's going to happen. And so what they do is they have a big council meeting back in Jerusalem. And they come back to Jerusalem. And there's 2 people that we have what they say listed. And we're told that Barnabas, Paul's partner, tells them, explains what's been going on and how they've been reaching non-Jews with the faith, how they've seen them convert, how they've seen them receive the Holy Spirit. We told that happens, but it's not recorded what they said. Peter is recorded what he says. And again, that makes sense. Peter, lead apostle, the guy that was with Jesus the most. He's a guy that had a vision from God about lizards and sheets and things like that. And the gist of the vision was that the gospel was for everybody. But the other guy that's recorded as speaking is James. The guy who thought Jesus was crazy. The guy who didn't believe. And this is what James says in Acts chapter 15, verse 13. We're going to read through everything he says. After they finished speaking, James replied, "Brothers, listen to me. Simeon," that's Peter, it's another name for Peter, "has related how God first visited the Gentiles to take them from a people for his name. And with the words of the prophets agree, just as it is written in verse 16, after this I will return, and I will rebuild the tent of David that has fallen, and I will rebuild its ruins, and I will restore it, that the remnant of mankind may seek the Lord, and all the Gentiles who are called by my name, says the Lord, who make these things known from of old. Therefore, my judgment is that we should not trouble those of the Gentiles who turn to God, but should write to them to abstain from the things polluted by idols and from sexual immorality and from what has been strangled and from blood. For from the ancient generations, Moses is in every city those who proclaim him, for he is read every Sabbath in the synagogue." So James makes this long speech. And he says, we understand the gospel, but we've got these things that we've been asked to do, and we're having a really hard time letting those things go. So let's make a compromise. We're going to ask the Gentiles, that's anybody who's not a Jew, we're going to ask the Gentile believers to respect basically 4 things that really, really bother us. These are the things that we can't get over. We're going to ask them to respect those things, and then we are going to let the rest of it go. But we're going to ask them to believe the gospel and do these things so we can get along. And you want to know what the group of leaders at the Council of Jerusalem, you know what they do? Exactly what James says to do. They do what James says to do, not what Peter says to do. They don't do what the other apostles say to do. They do what this brother of Jesus says to do. Why? What happened? What happened to take him from being anti-Jesus, not showing up at the crucifixion, trying to stop his ministry because he thinks he's crazy, making fun of his ministry, to being the leader at the Council of Jerusalem? As far as we can tell, he was the lead pastor at the church at Jerusalem, a church that had apostles as members. What changes? How can you be changed this much? How can it be this radical? What changes? And I think the change is listed in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Paul is writing here and he's talking to the Corinthian church about the gospel. And this is what he says. "I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the 3rd day in accordance with the Scriptures, and then he appeared to Cephas," yet another name for Peter. So if you're just looking for a guy with lots of names, Peter's your guy to go with. "He appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, that's the rest of the apostles. Then he appeared to more than 500 brothers at one time, most of whom are still alive, though some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles. Last of all, as the one untimely born, he appeared also to me." So Paul lists off the order in which Jesus appeared to the apostles, or appeared to people. He doesn't list everybody because we know that Mary is in there. Mary got to see him first. We know he doesn't list everybody, but he lists the men that he meets with. He lists, first of all, Peter. He meets with Peter. Then he meets with the rest of the apostles. Then he appears to 500 people. That's at different times. He's in different places. We know the story about the 2 men walking all along the road that Jesus appeared with. We know about the people that Jesus appeared to in crowds. We know that the church was significantly larger than just these 12 people, and he appeared to all of them. Then he appeared to the apostles again, spent time with them. But who does he make a special appearance to? James. James, the brother that rejected him. James, the brother that thought he was crazy. James, the one who said that he was being an arrogant jerk and should give up his pretenses. He appears to James. So what changes things for James? We don't know. But my guess is the resurrection changes everything for James. That meeting with Jesus after his death, burial, and resurrection is the only thing that can convince him that he's different. The resurrection. I think it was C.S. Lewis that said you can't just accept Jesus' teachings as a good teacher. Because if you're accepting his teachings and not the resurrection, if you're accepting his teachings and not the fact that he's God, then he's not worth listening to. Because he's the same thing that the brother said he was. He's crazy. He's crazy because he claimed to be God. He claimed that he was going to die and come back from the dead. I don't care that he also said, love your neighbor and be nice to people and forgive. He said he was coming back from the dead. Why are you listening to him if he's not right? Why are you listening to anything he has to say if he's not right? Do you make a habit of listening to people who rave on the street? He said, I'm going to die and come back from the dead. That's either true, or he's crazy, or he's a liar. And if it's true, then you have to accept the rest of what he said. Or he's just an egomaniac and a liar. He said, I am one with the Father. He said, I am God. He said, I am the only way to the Father. Either he's telling the truth, or he's an arrogant jerk that you shouldn't listen to. A lot of you base your voting off the fact that somebody's an arrogant jerk, and it doesn't matter what else he says, you're not going to vote for somebody that's an arrogant jerk. So if Jesus is going to be an arrogant jerk, and he's not actually telling the truth, then why are you accepting anything else he says? It doesn't matter how good of a boss your boss is. If he's also an arrogant jerk, you're not going to like him. So don't accept this and say, hey, he's a good teacher. He teaches some good things. He says we should forgive everybody, so I'm going to accept that, but I'm not going to accept what he actually said about himself, because he discredits himself if what he says is not true, if the resurrection is not true. Everything about Jesus hinges on this idea that the resurrection is true, and James is proof that it is. James didn't go on to riches and fame. James was executed for his faith that his brother had died and come back from the dead. He had a chance to recant and chose not to because he believed. James, who rejected Jesus, who rejected all the things that Jesus says, who was the biggest skeptic there was, saw the resurrection, and it was enough for him to believe. If the resurrection is true, there's one person for sure that should know about it. And that's James. And the proof of the resurrection, one of the evidences of the resurrection is the life of James, because you could not be farther from being a follower of Jesus. You could not be farther from accepting what Jesus had to say. All these other people, Peter, the other apostles, they accepted it before Jesus died and came back from the dead. They believed it just on faith because of the miracles, but James saw the resurrected Jesus. And it caused him to believe. It changed everything for him. And if it's true, which James proves it was, then it should change everything for you too. We're going to read through these teachings from James. We're going to read through this book of the Bible that he wrote, this short little book, the first book of the New Testament that was written. We're going to read through this, and we're going to see all the things that he said and all the things that he taught. But the reason that he was able to teach it, the reason that he taught it, the reason he believed it was because he saw Jesus and believed. The resurrection changed everything for him. And I just want to ask you, has the resurrection changed everything for you? Do you believe the things that Jesus taught? I'm assuming you do. You're here to listen to his words. I'm assuming you've accepted this, that he has something worthwhile to say. But I got to ask, if you're just here because he has good things to say and not because of who he said he was and who he proved he was, what are you doing? Why would you accept this? Why would you accept it if the rest of what he said is not true? But if you're ready to accept this, if you've recognized that he died, that he came back from the dead, which verified the rest of his claims, the teachings that he said that you need a way to the Father, that you are not good enough on your own, you need somebody else to stand in your place, the teachings of the apostles about what the gospel is and what it means, if you've accepted that who he is, that he has been resurrected, then have you placed your faith in him? Have you trusted in him for your eternal security? I'm not asking if you've been baptized. We baptize people today that have been saved for a while. They weren't unsaved until I finished it off with water. They were saved that entire time because they placed their faith in Jesus and trusted in him. And if you believe the resurrection is true, but you've not called out to him for forgiveness and rescue, what are you waiting on? What are you waiting on? Call out to him for forgiveness. Call out for him for rescue. Because if the resurrection is true, then you are in danger without it. And if you believe, do you live like you believe? Could anybody tell that you believe by the way that you live? You can tell that something changed with James. You can tell that something is different with James because his whole life became different. Everything about him became different. He went to pastoring apostles from rejecting Jesus. Everything about his life changed. Is there anything about your life that would tell anybody that you believe in the resurrection? Do you live like you believe? Let me just ask you a few questions to test this out. First of all, I want to ask you, let's start super easy. The easiest thing that Jesus asks you to do, the really super base level, no discomfort, really easy, is church optional for you. If the resurrection is true, he's God, he's given you commands, he's saved you, he's told you that you should not forsake the gathering together of yourselves, but should come together to stir one another up to love and good works, that you need a church. You don't just need attendance, but you need people that can pour into your life, hold you accountable, push you to do better, and you to do the same to them. That's what he's told you. Have you accepted that? Is church optional for you? Because if the resurrection is true and he's God, but you ignore him, I'm not sure you actually believe it. Is church optional for you? I know it can be difficult. I know that you've got a long week. I know this is one of your only days to get any rest. I get that. But Jesus, who you claim to believe, has said that what you need is to gather together with this group of people, not to listen to a sermon, but to be stirred up by one another, pushed to do better, to keep going. That's what you've been told you need. And if you can ignore him on that, then what do you really believe? This is the easiest thing he's going to ask you to do. Forgiving people who have hurt you is way harder than just showing up to a place where you have friends that love you. Forgiving people, asking for forgiveness, sharing the gospel, making your entire life about him is hard. This is, I do most of the work. You got these people up here, which our worship team does a ton of work. They're here an hour and a half early, or however it is early that they get here to make everything go well, to make sure that you have music to sing. We got volunteers that serve, and maybe you're a volunteer that serves, and I appreciate you doing that, but you're only doing that once a month or twice every 8 weeks, something like that. The rest of the time, you just show up and spend time with people that want to spend time with you. And if you can't do that, then what do you really believe about the resurrection? What do you believe? Is church optional for you? All right, let's make it a little bit harder. Is his plan for your life optional for you? What he wants you to do. Let's step away from the big things. I'm used to talking to teenagers. I talk to teenagers a lot. So we're talking about life plans and what you're going to do when you grow up and those kinds of things. Let's just take it a little bit closer. Have you got people that Jesus' plan is for you to forgive that you're choosing not to forgive? After he went to all the trouble to forgive you, are you still holding on to a lack of forgiveness that you need to let go? That's a pretty basic plan for his life, for your life. Have you got something that you need to ask for forgiveness for that you're choosing not to? You need to step up and you need to ask for forgiveness. You need to admit that you were wrong and you're choosing not to? If you can reject what he's saying on that, then what do you really believe about the resurrection? Because it changed everything for James, and it just seems to have changed your eternal destination for you. What's your plan? What's his plan for your money? We're told that where your treasure is, there your heart is. Is there anything about the way that you spend your money that says you care about the plan of God for your money? Is there anything about the way that you give your money and share your money and manage your money that says that any of it is available for him? What about the way that you're living out your marriage or the way that you're dating? Is there anything about that that says that you care anything about what Jesus has for you, that you believe that he's the only Son of God, that he died and rose from the dead, and now he's saved you and you're responsible to him for this? Is there anything about the way that you're dating, the way that you treat your parents, the way that you treat your kids, the way that you treat your spouse? Is any of that say that you care about his plan for your life? Is there anything about the way that you work or the job that you choose, the way that you act at work, the work ethic that you put into it that says that you care about how you work because he's the one that's in charge of you? Anything? Can we find anything? And if not, what does that say about what you believe about the resurrection? Let's just take it one more degree of difficulty harder. Is the gospel optional to you? You've received this gift. Hopefully you've received this gift. You've been offered it, whether you've received it or not. You've received this gift of forgiveness and salvation to change your eternal destination, been adopted into the family of God, been given eternal purpose, and invited to participate in his eternal purpose. Have you shared that with anybody? Have you told anybody? Ever? If not, then what does that say about what you really believe? That you're just okay? Like Jesus wasn't okay with them going to hell. He wasn't okay with you being separated from God, but you are? You're fine with that? If it depends on you, it's just not going to happen? Let's make it really easy. Bring them here and I'll tell them about Jesus. Have you invited them here? To the church you claim to love? The church you claim to be committed to? Have you even done that? Just invited them in? So that I can tell them about Jesus? If not, what does that say about what you believe about the resurrection? Guys, if you believe the resurrection, then you believe that Jesus is God, that he has authority over you and has the right to tell you anything he wants to, and you got to do it. What you've accepted when you accept salvation is that you are not good enough, and he's had to be good enough for you. And he's given you that gift. Do you believe that's true? If you do, that has certain downstream consequences. Things that you have to believe because of that. And I just want to ask, is there any way anybody would know without you having to tell them? Is there? James, one of the things that's just really the core idea of what he teaches is the idea that faith without works is dead. That if you believe, but you don't live like you believe, if you say that you believe, you say the words, but there's no action behind it, then that faith isn't real. And I just want to ask you, is it real? One of two things is going to be true if it is. Either you need to really question whether your faith is real or not, whether you've actually placed your faith in Jesus, whether you've actually believed this, or this is just a thing you do. or you are working so hard to suppress the work that he wants to do in you that nothing is evident about your faith in your life. Because you're afraid of getting fired, you're afraid of losing friends, you're afraid of making waves. You're just afraid. So is it true or not? I can't tell you the answer. I don't know your life. I don't know your money. I don't know your work. Some of you, I feel like I really know. I get to see who you really are. And some of you, I just see the Sunday morning version of you. And I don't know. You say, well, you're picking on me today. You're coming after me today. I'm not coming after anybody. But God may be. And if you're feeling that pain, you feel like I'm stepping on your toes, I got to understand this. It's not me. God has something he wants you to do today. He has a step of forgiveness that you need to take, forgiveness that you need to offer. You need to have a conversation about some things and change how you're living your life. You need to change how you're operating within your family. You've got a step that you need to take. James was a totally different person because of the resurrection. Who are you? Is there anything about your life that would indicate that you've experienced the same thing that James has? And if not, what steps do you need to take to change that? Would you stand with me? Our Heavenly Father, we come before you right now, and I'm so grateful for the chance to gather together and worship. I'm grateful for the resurrection, Lord, and what you've offered us in that. I ask that you would help us not to just live the way that we've always lived, but rather that we live as if we believe the resurrection is true. And I know that you want to sanctify us. You want to make those changes within us, that it's not up to us to make those changes, but we've got to let go and allow you to work. And I ask that we would do that. If there's any in this room that's been sitting in this room, that's been listening, that's heard these stories, but has not made a decision about the resurrection, I ask that they would be confronted with this conundrum of how you accept the words of Jesus, how you accept the teachings of the Bible partially, but then reject what's said about the resurrection. They would be forced to make a decision about that, to accept you or to reject you. I ask that we would be a church that's easy to love, that's easy to invite people to, that's easy to share the gospel with, Lord. And that we would be people that live as if the resurrection is true. I ask all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.